we are going to move on to our next panel, a very, very interesting panel led by our Associate Vice President for Global Affairs, Tamara Cunningham, who will be moderating a conversation on international education and economic mobility.
Thank you so much, Adrian, and let me be the first to congratulate you on this inaugural forum. It's truly an honor to be the moderator for this important panel discussion on the role of universities and economic mobility after COVID-19. I think it's important to start out and note that the Guarini Institute is hosting this forum during Hispanic Heritage Month. And so New Jersey Senator Bob Menendez, the highest ranking Latino in Congress, opened this month with the following, and I quote, "This is a time to recognize our shared heritage, as well as the diversity of traditions, places of origin, and cultures that make up the Hispanic community. It is also a time to reflect on the invaluable contributions Latinos have made to the fabric of American society, including a time of great sacrifice in our community as a result of the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. This month, as we celebrate our rich heritage and our undeniable history as a nation of immigrants, let's be proud of our roots and the sacrifices made by those before us. Let's celebrate the collective power of our community, and let's make sure our voices continue to be heard in every facet of American life." Today, we celebrate that collective power of our community as we honor the work of Hispanic serving institutions and minority serving institutions like NJCU in educating and supporting students from all walks of life. This forum speaks to the major role colleges and universities have in promoting the economic mobility of students, especially during challenging times like these. In particular, today, we are focusing on economic mobility after the pandemic, but it is critical to note that we have found ourselves in a few pandemics, including battling the issues of social injustice in America. Later in the session, we will speak to how economic mobility intersects with these issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion in this regard. So today I'm excited because we are joined by two very influential champions of globalization, Dr. Antonio Flores, the president of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, also known as HACU, and Dr. Allan Goodman, who is the president of the Institute of International Education, also known as IIE. Dr. Antonio Flores has served as president and CEO of HACU for over 20 years. And prior to his work there with HACU, he served as Director of Programs and Services for the Michigan Higher Education Assistance Authority and the Michigan Higher Education Student Loan Authority, with extensive professional experience in teaching, research, and service. Flores has received numerous recognitions and honors for his contributions to higher education, including the top influential leaders in the US and Latino community and the top 25 Latino leaders in education. Flores holds a doctorate in higher education administration from the University of Michigan, Ann Arbor. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that and recognize that our very own President Henderson has just been elected as the chair of the board of HACU. So congratulations to Dr. Henderson, and we look forward to continuing our relationship with HACU. I'd like to also welcome Dr. Allan Goodman, who is the sixth president of IIE, which marked its centennial in 2019. Dr. Goodman is a member of the Council on Foreign Relations, a founding member of the World Innovation Summit for Education, and serves on the selection committees for the Rhodes and Schwarzman Scholars and the Wise and Yidden Prizes. Before joining IIE, Dr. Goodman was Executive Dean of the School of Foreign Service and professor at Georgetown University. His books on international relations are published by Princeton, Harvard, Yale, University Presses, and he has served as the Department of State and the Central Intelligence Agency. Dr. Goodman has a PhD in government from Harvard University, and I am so excited to talk with these two heavy hitters. Now I'll turn it over to them, our panelists, to share about the mission of their respective organizations. And Dr. Flores, I'd like to begin with you. Please, won't you tell us a little bit about HACU?
Thank you, Dr. Cunningham. And thank you, President Henderson and Executive Director Franco, for inviting me to participate in this signature forum on the role of universities and international education to foster economic mobility in the age of COVID-19 under the auspices of the Frank J. Guarini Institute for International Education and Economic Mobility. And at this great university that I have been a distinguished member of HACU for many, many years, and it's a highly regarded Hispanic 7 institution across the country. I'm honored to join Dr. Allan Goodman, an internationally renowned leader, to discuss the challenges and lessons learned from the pandemic and advancing higher educational opportunity for underserved populations and the impacts of the pandemic on international education. As many of you know, and Dr. Cunningham just pointed out, Dr. Henderson has been a true champion of educational access and success for underserved populations and international education. I cannot think of a more fitting university to house this prestigious institute, which punctuates its name with economic mobility. Sue is a dear friend and colleague and one of my inspiring bosses as vice chair of HACU's governing board, and soon to be next month the new chair of the board. HACU is lucky to have an 18 board member comprised of college and university CEOs committed to its mission and is spearheaded by such visionary leaders. Let me first offer congratulations to our nation for celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month from September 15 to October 15, and for celebrating also Hispanic 7 Institutions Week this very week. President Biden and the US Congress have issued corresponding proclamations, and our great friend and great leader as well, Senator Menendez from New Jersey, has sponsored a special congressional proclamation for HSI's Week. And just yesterday, Senators Alex Padilla from California and Senator Bob Menendez announced the creation of a US Senate HSI caucus. This is indeed a historic week, month, and year for Hispanic higher education. We have much to celebrate. HACU's mission is to champion Hispanic success and higher education, both across the nation and beyond. Representing the 569 Hispanic 7 institutions, or HSIs, and emerging HSIs in 37 states and Puerto Rico, HACU also affiliates a growing number of more than 40 universities in Latin America and Spain. 67% of the 3.8 million Hispanic college students in the US attend HSIs. 21% of all Native Americans do attend HSIs as well. 25% of African Americans in college attend HSIs. 42% of all Asian Americans and more than 15% of non-Hispanic whites are part of the 5.3 million college students served by HSIs. HACU member institutions are a microcosm of America's diversity. HACU was founded in 1986 by 18 pioneering college and university presidents that came together on the campus of Our Lady of the Lake University in San Antonio 35 years ago and changed the landscape of US higher education. The importance of HACU's mission to champion Hispanic success in higher education is underscored by the rapid demographic growth of the Latino population, which from 2010 to 2020 contributed more than 51% of the nation's population total increase, as reported by the US Census Bureau. This continuing Hispanic population expansion is translated into greater K-12 and college enrollments across the nation, including eastern and southern states where employment opportunities are attracting unprecedented numbers of Latino families. In the two largest states, California and Texas, the Hispanic K-12 enrollment is already about 55% and growing. That's why California is home to 175 HSIs and Texas to over 100. And that's why about 30 new HSIs appear across the country every year. In the last 25 years, we went from 189 to 569 HSIs, or nearly triple the number. And 25 years from now, would the 569 HSIs become over 1,700? Just over 15 years ago, CACU had no international education affairs or programs, and we went from a handful of affiliated institutions to more than 40 now. Would CACU have hundreds of international members 15 years from now? Historically, Hispanics have participated in international education at very low rates, at about half of the rate of their numbers in college. In 15 years, would they be at par with their fast-growing numbers in higher education? These questions are not rhetorical at all. They are central to the future of this nation because the American labor force increasingly requires more highly educated workers to remain competitive in the global economy, and Latinos represent more than half of today's new workers joining the nation's labor force. Hispanic higher education and international education success is more important than ever for the good of the nation and the world. I look forward to our conversation on these very questions. Thank you.
Gracias, Dr. Flores. That was a wonderful opening. I'd like to turn it over now to Dr. Goodman to talk a little bit about IIE in his opening. Please, Dr. Goodman, over to you and welcome.
Tamara, thank you very much for having me. Sue, it's good to see you there. Tamara used the analogy from baseball that Antonio and I were heavy hitters.
Heavy hitters.
NJCU, that really is the heavy hitter. Every time we've had a scholar in the Scholar Rescue Fund to place at your campus, you've helped them hit a home run. And you've embraced the Benjamin Gilman Scholarship Program for undergraduate study abroad. In fact, your batting average for that scholarship over the past 5 years is about 500. So congratulations to all of you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Goodman. I appreciate that.
We appreciate you. And I know you're going to ask us later what interventions matter most, and one of them is hiring you. If you look at your resume and the summary of it in the end of the first paragraph, it's very clear what it takes to succeed. You start with being a champion for everything international, and then you do everything international. And I think no campus, HSI or not, can succeed unless they have a Tamara Cunningham and someone so dedicated and are part of a network like HACU. Very special for me to speak in an inaugural panel. It's also very special for me to work with Antonio. My stepmother came to America from Colombia. She didn't have a college education. She spoke 5 languages and said, the one thing I'm going to make you do, and she made me do many things, is go to college. So without the pressure of a Colombiana, I might not have had the resume that Tamara had just read. Many of you know IIE because we administer the Fulbright program and the Gilman scholarships on behalf of the Department of State. We also rescue scholars from war, terrorism, repressive regimes, and you might imagine that the past month has been all Afghanistan all the time. We also help stranded and threatened international students. We rescued our first scholar in 1920, and we rescued our first stranded international student in the same year. And we have been doing that every single year we've been in existence. And it gives me no pleasure to say that the past 18 months in the rescue business for us have been busier than any of the other 102 years we have been engaged in this. Busier than the Nazi period, busier than the Soviet period. And that was before Afghanistan, which will be a challenge for all America and all our institutions to embrace the scholars and the students that are fleeing from there. The other thing about our rescue work, like Fulbright, it's all the time, year round, and we will be there for the scholars and students that need help, and the Gilman students now that need to go abroad, and the Fulbright students that are coming and going. And it's my privilege to join this panel, and congratulations on the launch of your institute.
Thank you so much for those words, Dr. Goodman. I have to say that I just joined the Council on Foreign Relations, and you have a motto that you shared about everyone take one. And I'm just so excited about the opportunities to partner with IIE on all of the rescue scholar stuff. We had a rescue scholar a few years back from Syria that went on to do some fascinating work. So we just want to thank you and IIE for all of your work in that regard. So thank you. I'm going to start with you. And as we dive into this conversation, I just want all the participants to know that the question and answer board and feature is open. So as we go throughout this particular panel discussion, feel free to enter your questions there, and we'll ask Dr. Flores and Dr. Goodman to respond to those as we proceed through here. So Dr. Goodman, let's turn our attention then to the role of international education programs in advancing economic mobility. I mean, what impact does international education have on student economic mobility, and what are some programs and interventions as you see them in international education that have been successful in improving students' economic mobility?
Thank you. That's a great set of questions. And for me, the simple answer is jobs. If you can provide your students with an international education experience, they are more likely to have a job, more likely to graduate with a higher GPA, more likely to have a job offer, and more likely to have something to talk with an interviewer about than if they don't have that experience. So to me, international and education needs to go together. The other thing that we don't tend to think about so much is that the impact, especially on a minority student, of having an international opportunity lifts a whole family sometimes, a whole community. In the early days of Gilman, we had a student from San Antonio who won a Gilman to study abroad for a semester in Thailand. I think that's one of the longest air flights you possibly can take from San Antonio to Bangkok. And he had no family connections in Bangkok. But he wanted to challenge himself and go to a not usual place. When he was there, he discovered that all of the cleaning companies, both operated by making appointments on mobile phones and advertised that all the cleaning products that they were using were eco-friendly. When he came back home, he said to his mother, who ran a small cleaning company, 6 people, maybe we should make appointments by the mobile phone, and maybe we should say the products we use are eco-friendly. She now employs about 50 people. It helped something that he observed 12,000 miles away from home in a country that many people would consider less developed, helped lift a family and a business. And I think those are the kind of, in addition to what it does for the student, often it does something for the sibling, it does something for the peer group, it does something for the community. And in this case, it did something for the parents. So I think this is, to me, opening many, many doors of opportunity in ways that none of us can actually forecast.
Fascinating. Thank you. Dr. Flores, what about the impact does international educational programs have in career development? I mean, Dr. Goodman just talked about jobs and opportunities abroad in that perspective. What impact does this have on immigrant families, and how does it influence those who have never really been outside of the United States?
It's so special for many families to have a child to those of immigrant backgrounds to go to college, just to go to college. For the most part, they are first generation college students, all the children of immigrants. And actually, for many of them, studying in the US is a foreign experience in that sense, because they're learning a new language, getting used to a new culture, et cetera, everything that goes with that. And for many of them to go abroad, once they are established in the US, is doubly important in that sense. And it's doubly rewarding. And because in many instances, some of them have a chance to reaffirm their cultural and linguistic roots. If they go back to, let's say, Latin America, in the case of Latinos, or Spain, or the Caribbean, etc. And sometimes their language skills might not be as developed as we think they should be to be competitive in the job market. And going back there is very easy for them to recover that proficiency and to really shine in that regard, and to not only feel as if they are adapting to a new country in many cases, but to feel that there is value in the culture that came from, and that there is a lot to be offered to their new country in those cases, or to the country of their parents, and when they go back there. So it has so many tangible and intangible added values to have an international education experience. And as Ellen was just pointing out, at the end of the day, it really helps individuals to have an edge in employment opportunities, especially in our country where a lot of companies are looking for people who are able to converse in a language other than English, because they are global corporations, and it gives you a chance to advance faster in your career as well. And so when you bring the whole package of coming from a background that really allows you to clearly understand the ways people value things in other countries, and you understand their language, and you're able to also relate all of that to your employer and vice versa, it's just incredibly valuable for both the employee and the employer. So in the case of Hispanics, that's how I see having this such a tremendous added value. Let me just say that we are actually, as an association, trying to decide on whether to embark on a venture to, in our own college universities, the HSIs particularly, to have a program where students can be assessed in terms of their language proficiency in Spanish, and have that as an endorsement on their diploma, so that when they go and apply for a job, they have a validated bona fide backing and saying, I'm proficient at this level on the various domains, and that in itself will add tremendous value. Vice versa, in those countries where we have a presence in Latin America, we're thinking of how to do the same, but in English as a second language, because they have so much commerce with the US. I mean, Mexico is the #1 commercial partner with the US. So it makes all the sense in the world. So you can see how tremendously valuable an international education experience can be.
Dr. Flores, that's quite commendable at NJCU, and if you pick that up, that would be wonderful for us, because we had explored looking at a language requirement other than English, and credentialing that language requirement, and that would be something that we would definitely look to explore further at our institution, considering we have a lot of Hispanic and Latino students there. So that's excellent. Yeah. So, Dr. Goodman, Dr. Flores just said there are so many tangible and intangible benefits of education abroad and opportunities abroad, employment abroad, et cetera, for students. Obviously, COVID has hindered that for many of our students. And I'd like to just ask regarding the travel restrictions, what are some of the best practices considering the travel restrictions before and now to advance international education in the wake of COVID, in the wake of the pandemic?
Thank you for that question. We're all in the field grappling with it as we hopefully come out of the pandemic. And this is the 12th pandemic that IIE has gone through in its history. And during every one of them, exchanges continue. Fulbright continued all through this pandemic, both ways. And after every pandemic, exchanges grow. So, and study abroad grows. And I think it will happen in this case. We were worried that if the pandemic lasted as long as it did, maybe we'd all end up being Zoom zombies. Maybe nobody would want to study abroad anymore because it was much easier to get on a Zoom call. And in another couple of years, we could all put on those horrible virtual reality goggles and pretend that we're in another continent. We wouldn't really have to experience preparing to travel, preparing to adjust. And that hasn't happened at all in our field. Applications for Fulbright and Gilman are at historic high levels. So we see a lot of pent-up demand wanting to be released because people, when they have a dream to study abroad, they've had the dream for a long time. It's not, should I go to the football game this weekend or not? But they'll find a way to make this happen. So I think it then gives us the challenge to make sure where they're going is safe, that we learn the lessons of the pandemic for student health and safety. And one of the things we're in the process of doing, we know a lot about how universities have responded. We know a lot about how faculty have pivoted to online and hybrid teaching. We still need to learn a lot from how the students who were abroad got evacuated, what they needed to do that with, what they needed to be prepared to take with them, and how they felt when they got back home about studying abroad again. And I think that's going to give us a lot of insight into both preparing and protecting the next cohort going abroad, but also realizing that our students didn't give up the dream. They wanted to go abroad. They can't wait to go abroad. And maybe the best advisors for them are the students we had abroad that had to be evacuated, who can't wait to go back to where they were. Because when a student talks to another student about what the experience was like and says, actually, it was okay, and actually you can do it, they have a lot more credibility sometimes than we do.
Yeah, Raj Shetty started his conversation earlier about that dream, right? About that dream American dream, but really this dream to go abroad or go anywhere to experience something globally. And I love that you speak to the resilience of students and to scholars to do just that, right? What would you say to advisors, faculty, staff, where they're hearing the narrative is, consulates, borders, things are closed, folks don't want to travel. And here you are indicating that there are a record number of, applications coming in. What do you say to those folks?
Well, everybody has a bad experience, and everybody has heard that they couldn't get a visa or their passport renewal is delayed, but that's not really the reality. And it also depends very much on where you're going and when you're going. I think for us, the biggest challenge is going to have to be to issue the 5th edition of our book on study abroad, but not the student guide, the parent guide to study abroad. And our most popular version of that book is the Parent's Guide to Study Abroad in Spanish.
Yes.
And we have to get ready for a post-pandemic period when we take what we already know about studying abroad to ease the parent's mind, but also what we've learned from the pandemic to help them realize that it is still possible, it is still doable, and that by and large, their students, their children will be safe.
Dr. Goodman, we have a question from a student, and Dr. Flores, Krishna Gore is on the line. Krishna, if you would come on video, please, for us and ask your question. We'd love to receive you at this time. Hi, Krishna, welcome.
Thank you, Tamara. I appreciate you. And good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, honorable panelists and all the attendees. My name is Krishna Gaur, and I am an international student from India. I do agree with Dr. Goodman that before, when I came, it was a dream for us to be in other country, to be outside of other country, have and pursue the education. So I would like to ask the question that we all are aware of the fact that America, United States of America, is a very diverse country. And every year, large number of international students like me enroll to the different university. So I want to ask that where I can find a natural connection between internationalization and diversity and equity and inclusion. I mean, I want to find the natural connection, how it is connected.
I think we have to be very intentional when we welcome and recruit international students. We have to make sure that we're reaching all levels of the societies we want to find international students in. We want to be sure that we're not only providing opportunities to those who are fluent in English because their parents are wealthy. And what we have to work really hard when we say we want to have more students from India or Brazil or even China, we have to work very hard to make sure that we are as inclusive and as diverse in our admissions recruiting and practices as we are for our own students. Because there are so many more talented people in the world than just the wealthy who speak fluent English and have no worries about money coming here. So I think it's a big challenge for us. A few years ago, we had the privilege of administering a program for Ford Foundation to recruit international graduate students to come to US and European institutions, but there were some requirements. You had to not be from the privileged sector of your society. And the hardest problem we had was persuading US admissions officers that people from the poorest sectors of society could win gold medals, math Olympiads, and would make terrific graduate students. And they did. And the obligation should be on admissions programs now to realize that experiences goes into the future and to make sure that as we welcome students from all over, we welcome students from every sector of their own societies.
Dr. Flores, do you want to respond to that question?
Well, it's a very intriguing question because obviously it implies some of the issues that we grapple with as an association ourselves, and Alan alluded to the issue, for instance, of equity and access for lower income populations to international education opportunities. If you look at the data from the International Education Institute that Alan leads so well, they put out this open doors report every year. And if you look at the data, more than half of all the students who go to study abroad from the US or who come here, they underwrite their expenses with family money and their own resources, which means that the majority are privileged type of backgrounds. And then in our case, as an association, where in our own institutions, all the HSIs, 67% of all the Latinos attend HSIs, and more than half of them are all low income. And so how can we reconcile the need for educational opportunity abroad with low incomeness? That is the key, because for us to bring more, let's see, from Latin America, for example, Mexico particularly, which is right next door, only about 1.5% of all the students in the US are from there. And the other way around is about the same thing. And what does that mean? It really means that we have to find a different paradigm of international education that is very, very different from the way it has been. And to me, that means for lower income people from other countries with a talent but no money and no connections, it means that we have to provide for the room and board, which is the main expense here, tuition and transportation. Obviously, insurance, medical insurance goes with all of that. So we have to find a different way. I'm glad to hear that the Ford Foundation did something with the European students and so forth. But we also have to think of what's going on in the international scene in terms of foreign relations. You know, if you look at the numbers, more than 1/3 of all the foreign students coming to the US come from China, have come from China, followed by India, very close. I mean, like about 15–18% from India, but more than 1/3 from China. That is likely to change dramatically if things continue to go the way they are going with respect to US-China relations, for instance.
Yeah. Okay.
And yet, if you look at Latin America has been really totally neglected because the numbers are so dismal both ways. The students who come from there and the students from the US who go there. And they are right next door to us. And so, again, it's because our country has been historically, in terms of foreign of study abroad opportunities, very European bound. In terms of bringing students, Asian has been mainly the source. Well, think about it. A student from Iowa who goes to study in London because England is the main country, followed by others in Europe. Well, what is going to be the added value for someone who already speaks the language of Shakespeare and who was raised in an Anglo family to go study in London? I think that student will get a better and more enriching experience going to Miami, where there are a lot of Latinos and Spanish is spoken everywhere. or LA, where they can also get a great international experience, or here in San Antonio, where I live. Okay, so the point is, we have to rethink international education in order to open it up to more people who historically have been excluded. Both ways, in the US and abroad.
I want to challenge you on this, only because there are competing priorities, especially in higher ed, right? You talk about even inbound or outbound. We have funding issues sending students out, and we have funding issues for students who are coming in, where you're, indicating that we should show support financially for housing, tuition, et cetera, right? Because these are students who might be on the lower economic stratosphere. So how do we partner? Who do we partner with? Or what is the strategy for, identifying funding for these students or for these types of programs, considering that higher ed is not funded the way, especially for state institutions like NJCU, for example, not funded the way that we'd like it to be funded. So, and we have competing priorities at the university. So what would be your suggestion? And thank you, Krishna, for that question.
Well, the key to your question, Tamara, is priorities. You said it. And who would need to set priorities differently? Foundations, corporations that fund all of that, and government. All of those three different sectors, and in addition, universities, because the universities fund a large percentage of students coming into this country, they all have to rethink that, okay? But we have just historically gone for the lower hanging fruit, so to speak.
Right, right. Which is
Okay.
why we're always in China.
And those times have to be retaught.
I understand.
Because again, if we're not going to be able to bring the same numbers of high achievers from other countries to take on engineering and science jobs here, we have to grow our own homegrown talent. Okay, on the one hand. And in terms of international education, we have to rethink again the way it is being funded and how it's being executed. And to me, for example, a university in Costa Rica or whatever in Latin America that doesn't have a lot of resources to send students could partner with one here and reciprocate on the tuition side. Okay, so that one from here could send them over there and not charge tuition at that institution and vice versa. Because for them, tuition is one of the biggest ticket items in terms of coming to study in the US.
Sure.
And then in terms of room and board, well, we have the experience that in high school, we find homes from middle-class families who are willing to house high school students for a year or whatever. Why couldn't we do it in college? Okay, but the institutions have to decide that they want, that's setting priorities right there, that we want to do it.
Yeah.
And we're going to do it this different way. Okay.
Thank you.
And like Haku has an agreement with Southwest Airlines, for example, to have low-income students to go visit universities across the country when they don't have the means, and their parents to go for a graduation and whatnot. We could extend that internationally, okay, so that they don't have to worry about having to pay for thousands of dollars for a plane ticket and so forth. So we have to be creative, but we have to set it as a priority. And government has to do that too. So they have to invest in organizations that are innovative and that really have a mission to break down those barriers.
I appreciate that. We are closing in on time here, but there is one question that just came in, and I'm just going to read it quickly. It's for either of you, Dr. Flores or Dr. Goodman. What is your opinion about the students of the American continent who are facing obstacles when they come to the United States in terms of academic measure with other students?
I think our education ought to embrace different learners at different levels of learning abilities. There's a ton of research that over the past 25 years that has taught us about the different ways in which people learn. And one of the greatest joys of teaching in a diverse intercultural class is that you may be the professor, but if you have 25 different cultures represented, how you teach, what you teach, how people learn, what they have problems with is very different than if they're all from the middle of Iowa. Nothing wrong with Iowa. But I think we have to rethink these as not problems, but as opportunities to improve our classes, our teaching, and the students that are taking them.
Thank you, Dr. Goodman. Dr. Flores, any final comments?
On that same question, Tamara, I think what we have learned from the pandemic, one of the silver linings of the pandemic has been our greater use of technology for teaching and learning. And I think they can be applied to international education issues like the one we're talking about, how to help those who may be slightly or significantly behind academically to get up to the level. And we can use technology for that. And we have to also think of how is that we have to use different ways of assessing not only performance, but outcomes. And in ways that would be more helpful to increasing access for those who have not been able to do it in the past.
Sure, sure. Well, Dr. Goodman, Dr. Flores, thank you so much for a very provocative conversation. I wish we had more time to go on and on, but I do want to thank you for your time and for your contributions to this forum. I'm excited for all who joined us today. I hope you were able to gain something that will help you in your line of work or help you as a student. And I look forward to the next panel discussion, which will be moderated by our very own founding dean of the School of Business, Dean Bernie McSherry. So please stay on and stay tuned for our next panel. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank
Hi,
you.
Sue.
Bye-bye.
How are you?
Bye.